was on the broadcast last night with Brian Greasy and Steve Levy. He's Louis Riddick, who was kind enough to join us on the program. Louis, let me start with this question. Thanks for joining us. Was this a good night for the Cleveland Browns?
Yes, it was. It was. And I know, I said last night, Dan, that there's no consolation prizes in the NFL. There's no moral victories. But I think for this football team and for the city, given the fact that this is a team that had beaten them 8 out of the past 11 games, I believe it was, or 8 out of the past 10 games, something like that. And given the fact that the narrative surrounding the Browns is really not a narrative. I mean, it's a truth that they hadn't beaten anybody good. They hadn't really stood up and really given the quality teams, for say, in the NFL, real good games outside of playing Tennessee the way they did the week before and beating them. They needed to have a good performance. They needed to have a strong performance. They needed to show that they can compete for 3.5 hours, however long a game is going to take, and compete at a high level and play an exciting brand of football for really people to say that's not the same old Browns then. And I think they accomplished that. And if for a play here and there, for them not to, if it wasn't for the fact that they went up against the reigning MVP, who quite honestly put on like a Superman-like performance last night, they win that football game. And I think people, if you really look at it, you don't have any kind of grudge against the Cleveland Browns or aren't just predetermined to say, look, the Browns are the Browns and they're not going to be relevant again. Then you would make that kind of objective assessment that this is a different football team and Kevin Stefanski has them going in the right direction.
Assuming both make the playoffs, who would be the tougher out?
Wow. I would probably still say the Ravens would still be the tougher out because of the fact that Lamar is just so different. He's such a difference maker. And when if he's not able to really get it going through the air, whether it be because he's not on or because the wide receiver core is letting him down in many respects, like they did last night for the better part of the game, until Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown make some good big plays late. I still think that they have enough on the offensive side to give every team a scare because of Lamar, because of how special he is just as an athlete overall. And I think the defense, they were down some players last night, particularly in the secondary, and it started to cost them late in the game. I think the defense is one where they'll be able to ratchet it up and they will be able to make enough plays, enough game-changing plays in order to keep them in it and give Lamar enough possessions to win a football game in a single elimination type scenario. So I'd give them the nod.
Yeah, I would too, because Lamar is one of the handful of players has that it factor, and I think that the Ravens are going to get healthier here over the next month. But if I'm Cleveland's defense, what did they want Lamar to do last night? What were they trying to get him to do? Because I still don't know. Yeah,
that's a great point. It's a great point. What happened was, with him, they let him get every time they played man-to-man coverage against their wide receivers, and they didn't have good vision on Lamar. That's when they got themselves in trouble. When they played zone coverage, played with good vision on him, kept him contained, so to speak, in the pocket, and were able to rally to him because they had 11 eyes on him because people were able to play with good vision, they were relatively successful. So I think that's what wound up happening. When they broke down, he doesn't give you much margin for error, and he took advantage of them whenever they turned their back on him, so to speak. And I said that a couple different times last night, that anytime he's making them pay, every time they try to make him pay by playing tight man coverage against him and seeing whether or not he can throw the football against them. Because he'll just say, hey, look, maybe I can't get the ball where I need to get it to right now in the passing game, but what I can always do is I can always take off and run and just gas you that way. And he did that last night. And I think he does that against a lot of people. He does that against the majority of people he goes against. Cleveland still has some work to do, Dan. There's no question about that. They still have some work to do on the defensive side where they'll need some more reinforcements, and they'll need to add some guys this offseason. And remember, Denzel Ward wasn't playing last night either. So, I mean, there's still some work to be done. But that's Lamar. Lamar has will have you start looking at your roster and going, man, what else do I need? Are we not really good enough when he makes you look like that?
Did you have an idea what was going on in the locker room?
We were, you know what? I suspected that, maybe it was, look, players sometimes, nature calls. Sometimes things just happen to where you have to do what you need to do. I wasn't sure. I mean, I just knew this. When the Ravens kept saying that that there was nothing wrong with him, he wasn't hurt, he wasn't injured really, I thought, it could be a wide range of things. But I really didn't have any idea. Quite honestly, when Trace McSorley went to the football game and he was throwing the ball with some good effectiveness, I was like, man, this could be interesting. Maybe we're going to see a coming out party for Trace McSorley right here. and then next thing you know, he slips and, his knee gets caught up and I'm going, what the heck is going on? And then you see Lamar come running back out and I'm going, this is just nuts. This is high drama right here. It was actually pretty cool how it all happened. I just hope Trace McSorley is okay. I haven't heard exactly what, the extent of his injury, but I mean, Lamar told us what he told us as far as what happened in the locker room. Nevertheless, I mean, the way he won that game for him, before, he didn't win it, but the way he set it up for him, what a heck of a story it was.
Okay, how does that work? When you played,
yeah,
and you have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
I'm sure you've heard stories, man, about. I guess it depends what kind of going to the bathroom you're talking about. All right. If you just have to go number one, so to speak. I mean, some guys. Dan, look, man, I play with guys who just would go in their pants. I mean, Mark Schlereth used to talk about all the time about guys who would just go in their pants. Right there on the sideline. I mean, there was no porta potty or anything like that on the sideline. So, I mean, guys who just would take matters in their own hands, so to speak. When it comes to something else, for me, that never happened. I mean, that's the weird thing in all my years of football, from Pop Warner all the way to the pros. I don't think in a game that ever happened to me. I don't remember there being a situation where it became an issue for someone else. It was usually something that people took care of at halftime or whatever. But
I remember Rodney Harrison saying,
never happened to me.
Rodney Harrison said that you just sit on the bench, put a towel underneath you, and
I have never seen somebody do that.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I've never seen that. But that would be wild. I would have known if that would have happened. Believe me, man, I would have known. But it just never came up.
He's Louis Riddick, ESPN Monday Night Football analyst, former pro scout, director of pro personnel, and former NFL defensive back. Do you hold any grudges with anybody that you played against? Was there somebody that hit you, said something like it'll never go away?
No, I don't. Not while we were playing. No, because
But now, like you.
No. I mean, there's nobody really that I would say that I feel as though I didn't even score with or something like that. No, I don't. And the reason why, honestly, is because I know that that's just the way football goes, man. I mean, sometimes you get them, they get you. And I think the reason why I felt I'm good with that is because as many times have I got whacked and or hit or beat or whatever it is, I know I gave out my fair share. And I'm good with that. And I kind of liked it like that. I never felt like anybody hit me dirty or anybody tried to injure me or anything like that. So I was good with the give and take.
Did you ever hit somebody and feel sorry?
Yeah, I think I did. We were when I was a rookie in Atlanta in '92 in the preseason, we were playing against Cleveland. I was playing for Jerry Glanville then, and there was a wide receiver who caught a slant route. Now, the interesting thing about that was I was groggy in that game. These were back in the days before, there was like a real extensive, checking on players who, maybe had concussions or what have you. And, I know I was not right in that game, and I wasn't quite sure. I had a couple big hits on Kevin Mack in the preseason, and you remember how big Kevin Mack was. I mean, every time you hit Kevin Mack, he's going to kind of knock your screws loose a little bit. And I hit this wide receiver simply because I was just standing in the middle of the field, didn't even know what the defensive call was, and I just know the ball was thrown, and I just sprinted towards this wide receiver and just hit him with all I had. And one of our defensive backs, I think his name was Frankie Smith, was hanging on him at the same time. And I knocked the wide receiver out. I mean, he was out cold. And I believe he wound up having, he suffered some kind of injury to his neck or back. And Frankie Smith, who was hanging on him in the corner, who was covering him at the time, his finger got caught between me and the wide receiver. And it just obliterated his finger. And I think that's the time where I felt, man, not only did I injure the guy, I injured one of my own teammates, and I wasn't even quite sure what I was supposed to be doing at the time. So yeah, some of those big hits like that, you feel bad afterwards. But I mean, that's just the way that's the way the game was, and that's the way we played it, and that's the way I played it. And you didn't want to see guys get hurt, but it definitely, in the 90s, 80s, it was a different type of game, back then, especially when it came to collisions and high-speed collisions in the secondary. I mean, they were a regular occurrence. You know how that was.
Well, I tell this audience all the time, if you saw a game from the sidelines, you would never let your kid play that game. Because
no doubt.
It is just, I can close my eye. I went to a Giants game, and I was on the sidelines when LT was there and that great defense. I closed my eyes because I wanted to hear a game for a couple of plays. Holy smoke show. It was scary, Lewis. Scary. Yeah. The sound.
It is. The images, the sound, the collisions. Like I played with, when I was in Cleveland, and then when I was in Atlanta too. In Atlanta, I played with Scott Case, Jeff Donaldson, Jesse Tuggle. Scott Case and Jeff Donaldson at safeties were pound for pound two of the toughest guys who ever played in the NFL. I saw Scott Case leave his feet and hit people, and the sound that you would hear, it was like a bomb went off. I played with Eric Turner in Cleveland. Eric Turner was easily in that category of the late great Don Rogers, Kenny Easley, Ronnie Lott, Dennis Smith, those types of guys who were just vicious hitters, vicious. And when I played for the Raiders at the last year of my career, when I went out there, every time I was trying to hit people like George Atkinson hit people, love him or not. I mean, Jack Tatum was probably the biggest hitter of all time. And you're right. When you're doing it, it's not that you don't really know just how vicious it sounds. But when you see your teammates do it, or if you're on the sideline, you see another defender do it, you realize this is not for the timid, man.
Ooh.
It's not for the timid at all.
I'll leave you with this. The number of teams that you honestly think can go to the Super Bowl in the AFC and the NFC. Let's start with the AFC, that you truly believe they could represent their conference in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, Kansas City can, and they probably will. Buffalo right now, Buffalo's on a mission, and I think they're going to give Kansas City all they want in a rematch type scenario. We know Kansas City ran over them pretty hard earlier in the season. I think those two in the AFC are probably the ones who you legitimately say in all different types of environment scenarios. Those two teams can travel and they can play. They can play you however. I think the Colts are sneaky because Chris Ballard is starting to give them that kind of. He's kind of building them in that kind of image.
Are you sold on Phillip Rivers?
No, and I think in the end when you assess them, I'm sold on Phillip Rivers as a quality quarterback. He's done great things in his career. I just don't know if he has enough gas in the tank to deal with a team like Buffalo and Josh Allen, like Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. Those guys are special. Those guys can make the difference. Phillip can't be the difference anymore.
Yeah, and
I think that's the difference.
All right, NFC. How many teams legitimately can go to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, in a one-off type of scenario, I think you probably have to count out the teams in the NFC East, only because I just don't know if they're ready yet. Although teams like Washington and even the Giants, they're showing a lot of grit here late in the season. I just don't know if they're ready to contend with the Packers because Aaron is just that special, and him and Matt LaFleur have it going on. So that's one of them. You know the Saints are going to be there despite the egg they basically laid against Philadelphia last week. You know they're going to be there because they can do it all offensively and defensively, especially when Drew's healthy. Tampa, I'm not so sure, man, anymore about Tampa. I just don't know. I mean, Bruce says that they can do whatever the hell they want, quote unquote, as far as their identity offensively. I'm just not so sure.
But they got to win three games on the road, though, Lewis. They're not going to have home field advantage.
Exactly. But, I mean, a lot of people in the NFL believe home field advantage doesn't mean anything. And I guess it depends where they have to go, especially in this pandemic year. I guess it depends where they have to go. If they have to go somewhere cold weather, then maybe that's the equalizer. But I don't think home field's the same as it is. I really don't. But we'll see with them.
Seattle?
And then Seattle, if their defense can continue to come on, yeah.
And the Rams, too, though. The Rams, to me.
That's right. There's a lot more in the NFC.
They're solid.
That's right. The Rams are a down-and-dirty type team. Great defense. Brandon Staley is a great young coach, up-and-coming coach, be a head coach very soon. And on the offensive side, when Sean is in that rhythm and Jared Goff is in that rhythm with him, they will run the ball down your throat with those backs that they have. And then they'll gas you with that play-action passing game. They are sneaky. Oh, actually, they're not sneaky anymore. People know that Sean McVay's a good coach, and they know that they have a solid football team. So, yeah, there's a lot more possibilities in the NFC.
It'll be the Steelers at the Bengals next Monday night. Lewis, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely, Dan. Always love coming on. Thank you.
That's Louis Riddick, a former defensive back, former scout, director of pro personnel.